Mhm. Mhm. Good. Warm greetings to you from Rome Reports, this webinar, this conversation on Ukraine. There really is nothing else we want to talk about or care to talk about at this time, except for what is happening in Ukraine at this very moment and the effects of what is happening as they appear and continue to influence what is happening in the rest of the world. We have a very qualified panel here joining us today. We have two people from Ukraine and we have two people outside of Ukraine who will help us to understand and to see the situation from these two perspectives, literally from the inside looking out and from the outside looking in. Please let me introduce them to you. Professor Svitlana Keluk, she's director of the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv's Law School. She's also a legal expert on the Council of Europe project entitled Supporting Institutions to Combat Ill Treatment of Ukraine, and she's a member of the Academic Advisory Board of the Constitutional and Supreme Court of Ukraine. Svitlana, we're honored to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Svitlana.
Thank you for having me.
Are you exactly? Where are you? You're in Ukraine. Where are you at this time?
Now I'm in Lviv, not far from my university, staying with my students and my faculty.
And very briefly, the situation in Lviv at this moment?
Lviv is a relatively safe place in comparison with other Ukrainian areas. And today Lviv accepts a lot of people from the other Ukrainian regions, and Lviv nowadays Lviv is humanitarian hub for other parts of Ukraine and try to make its contribution to our common victory.
We have another member of the faculty. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. He is Professor Volodymyr Tulkanovsky. He is also director of the International Institute for Ethics and Contemporary Issues. He's also a very good friend, and so I'm delighted to see him even at a distance and over Zoom. You're welcome, Volodymyr. It's good to have you with us.
Well, thank you. Welcome to everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be with you tonight, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Same question. Where are you at this particular moment in time?
Well, I'm in Lviv. I'm on the campus, Ukrainian Catholic University campus right now, and it's as Svitlana has mentioned, Lviv is relatively safe. Well, sometimes a few times a day, we might have an air raid alarms, and that would imply that everyone who's on campus, and we have faculty and students on campus, they would have to go down to the basements and hide themselves for whatever time it takes. Usually would be like 30 minutes or maybe 40 minutes, and then we're going back to our work.
We'll get back to you in a minute. Let me introduce the other member of the panel. Her name is Kristina Golovko. She is a journalist at Ukrainska Pravda. She's also an accomplished musician, and I'm delighted that she can join us too. She's here in Rome. Kristina, how did you get here? Why are you in Rome?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I was on a boat when war started, and I decided to go to Rome because I have friends here. But my heart and my soul are with my family, who also live in Lviv, and all my friends who live around of the Ukraine.
We have a fourth member of the panel, as I mentioned, who will be joining us very briefly. He's another young journalist. He studied journalism at the Ukrainian Catholic University, Ostap Yaresh, and would someone just let me know when he does come in so we can help him join in the conversation. The title of this conversation today sounds almost like a rhetorical question, and I apologize if it sounds trite, but we'll get there in a moment. The title of the conversation is there a solution to the war in Ukraine? And the simple answer to that is yes, of course there is, that Russia should stop its aggression and withdraw its troops. But in order for that to happen, I am curious to hear from our friends on the ground and our friends further away, how you think that might happen. And even if I could start with you, Svetlana, to help understand how it's possible that we are where we are. How could this be happening?
It's difficult to find just one reason for this. But as a lawyer, my background is criminal law and the human rights law. And what is a fundamental principle of criminal law that the evil should be punished. If it is not, there will be consequences. So all of us are aware of the Russian occupation of the Crimea. It happened 8 years ago. Was evil punished? No. So now we have the second stage. And as a lawyer, I have to stress that either we find a way to punish the evil, or there will be next steps. And Ukraine will be not the only victim of this evil, which is Russian state. This is the reason, for me as a lawyer, I see this way, why the act of aggression happened. The second one, or the third one, because Crimea was first, then we had Donbass, and now many other regions of Ukraine. And we should admit that each next step took much more lives of civilians, of our soldiers, than the previous one. So at the one moment, we have to stop this by legal means and by other means, military as well. And what now Ukraine expects to get, what support Ukraine needs right now, it's to get shelter for our sky and no-fly zone under Ukraine, above Ukraine.
Volodymyr, I'm going to turn to you as an expert in social sciences. You're a philosopher, and so what your perspective? One of the reasons why we're having this conversation is because I'm afraid that a lot of what I see and hear is a simplified explanation of the situation. And so what I'm hoping to hear from you is to get some insights and understanding, as we just heard from Svetlana, the legal aspect, your perspective. How did we get to where we are right now?
Well, thank you. One important thing to remember is that all what we see now was unfolding for many, many years already, for at least 20 or more years. And I'm kind of constantly asking myself a question these days as to why and how possibly could it have happened that someone like Putin was gradually, year by year, kind of growing, building its empire and kind of building its ideas and visions for the empire, and eventually that brought to the situation where we are now. It's interesting, and I think very telling that in his words just before. In his statement, just before he gave an order to invade Ukraine, he was very clear and explicit as to why he's doing that. And he simply said that Ukraine is a kind of non-existent nation. It's kind of non-existent country. And he was saying that, that Ukrainians, they have no right to exist. That's that's a kind of explanation reason that he was given to Russian people and to, I know, outside world. So from his viewpoint, that was a way to fix that anomaly and kind of bring together and rebuild the Russian Empire. And eventually, I think what has happened that he has built that kind of virtual world in his head, which is very, very distant from what reality is. He managed also to convey that vision in the Russian public space, and I think to a large extent convince Russian people that that's the kind of the real situation. He was also building a very heavily centralized state. I think for people in the West, it's very difficult to understand or even to believe how heavily centralized is that system which Putin has established. So he is not simply kind of running the government or the army, but I think almost every aspect of that life is controlled, whether that would be media, for example, or the church, or everything. Difficult to imagine. So his power is in the fact that whatever he decides, I mean, almost everyone executes that. So the command goes through all these different kind of channels, and he seemed to be very, very unified. And he's kind of very well targeted in what he is trying to achieve. That's, I think, is his force, and kind of this is what was very difficult for people in the West to get. And he built that kind of virtual empire. That virtual empire is very much kind of ruled is grounded in lie and lying. That's also, I mean, truth is out of the question, basically. I think that during the Soviet time, as a matter of fact, I mean, they were also lying a lot, but they were pretending to make it a true thing. So they were kind of arguing and trying to prove, no, I'm telling you truth, and kind of making up some kind of evidence for that. In case of Putin, I think it simply doesn't care about whether this is true or not. I mean, that's a kind of very different way and approach to this. And so with this kind of vision, with this idea of rebuilding the empire, and he was very explicit, by the way, because we all remember Georgia, as a matter of fact, or Moldova, or any other moments in or Crimea, as a matter of fact, which was 8 years ago. That was the beginning of this law. So it's quite, he was, I think, sending quite clear messages as to where he is heading with what he would like to do and to achieve. And eventually he launched this law, this war, and it's getting very brutal. It's getting very brutal. I think that he was really serious about making that statement that that Ukrainians have no right to exist. As we are seeing now, I mean, the cities are being destroyed. So he's not shooting, he's not bombarding at the military objects. He's really sending his bombs and missiles to civilians. And we see those kind of horrible pictures of people being killed and being wounded, and the children are being killed. It's a real war crime situation. And I think that he wants to spread panic and fear among Ukrainian people. He would want to be very explicit in that he's trying to destroy the country and kind of occupy the country in this way.
The war crimes issue, and I'd like Svetlana to address that if you can, as a lawyer, and what that might mean. But if you allow me very, very quickly to introduce and welcome our next guest. Ostap, I see you've joined us from Washington.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I need to tell you, is an international journalist and anchor at the Ukrainian service of Voice of America based in Washington, D.C. And we're grateful to Voice of America for allowing us to share him with them for this brief time. Ostap worked previously for television in Ukraine. He also interned with me at Vatican Media. And so, again, I'm delighted to see a good friend of mine joining us.
Same here, thank you.
We've been hearing, Volodymyr gave us a very graphic and eloquent description from the inside looking out. But you have almost a privileged position there in Washington, D.C. I've seen some of your reports translated for me on my Facebook account. But from your perspective on Washington, D.C., what are they saying? What's the administration, the American administration saying? What are Americans saying looking across from so far away?
Frankly, Sean, I've never seen that big attention to Ukraine, never here in the United States, both from the ordinary people and the Congress, the administration. And the support that I see, we see the strong sanctions from the Biden administration, from the Congress, and we see steps that are being taken. Of course, I know that people in Ukraine are concerned that those steps are not enough. We try to ask those questions about the close sky, about the more weapon supplies, defensive weapon supplies, and we see that the administration is saying that nothing is off the table and they are ready to implement further steps. We are watching. We're trying to monitor this closely and to report to the Ukrainian audience. If we talk about the support from the American people, honestly, before, when we had the protests about Ukraine or in support of Ukraine, we saw Americans joining them, but those were mostly people who had either families in Ukraine or friends in Ukraine. Now what we are seeing, that people who has nothing to do with Ukraine, they are joining the protests because they say they are impressed, they are amazed how the Ukrainian people, how the Ukrainian army is fighting. And this is not only the support that we see, just statements or words, but I have also seen that the Americans, they are donating to Ukrainian humanitarian organizations or to the Ukrainian army, to volunteer initiatives, or they are calling their representatives in the Congress, trying to urge them to act, to implement more severe and stricter sanctions. Or we know that some Americans are willing to join the battles in Ukraine. We know that Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukrainian president, announced that there will be international unit formed from the with the international people, foreign people, and we know that the Americans, those who have combat experience, veterans, that they are willing to go to Ukraine, and they're actually now in the process of logistics and organizational issues to how to join the Ukrainian forces in their fight against Russian aggression. So the support that I'm seeing here is unprecedented, and as one of the senators said, he hasn't seen that big unity and that big support, both when it comes to Congress and American people, probably since 9/11. Sean.
I'm going to jump from you very quickly to Christina, who is here in Rome. You're speaking from the American perspective. Christina, what is your experience? How are people responding to the war in Ukraine from Italy?
So here in Rome was very supportive, and even they have manifestation to support Ukraine. I saw many also Italian people that support Ukraine, and also Ukrainian diaspora help Ukrainian army and try to get money and help to buy ammunition for soldiers. And I see how the Italian people support Ukraine and Ukrainian position to be in US.
Jump very quickly to a testimony. I'd like to hear, there's a brief video that was produced by the Ukrainian Catholic University, and let's watch and hear the voice of Anya.
Я студентка другого курсу філології. Навчаюсь в УКУ. З Києва. Зараз приймаю гуманітарку, яку приносять люди. Дуже багато людей, дуже багато речей. Видно, що насправді всі дуже перейняті цим, згуртовані. У мене тато пішов на фронт, мама залишається вдома, і мені здається, що мамі було б насправді краще тут, тому що розумію, що середовище дуже сильно впливає. І коли ми тут всі разом і ми маємо що робити, ми почуваємось набагато адекватніше. Ми сублімуємо насправді наші переживання таким чином. Я розумію, що я знаходжусь з тими людьми, які рідні мені, бо ми всі разом тримаємо спільну справу. Я розумію, що навколо мене є отці, з якими я можу говорити, є храм, в який я можу прийти. Я розумію, що мені дуже пощастило в тому, де я знаходжусь, що я можу робити і до яких людей я можу звернутися. Стараюся думати про це, стараюся вміти молитися про тих людей, кому це потрібно зараз. Стараюсь не думати, не збудовуючих сумних думок. Цей час і ця ситуація – це те, що може показати, хто є хто насправді, кому що цінне і хто в що вірить. Стосунок з Богом – це дуже намацальна річ, яка відбувається прямо тут, яка втілюється в конкретних речах. І цей час – це теж момент, коли ми маємо робити щось, тому що це є про любов. І, по суті, все, чого ми хочемо, і все, що ми робимо, це тому, що нами рухає велика любов.
Тут їжа, але тут є аптечні засоби, їх туди перекладають. Перефокусуйтесь на одяг, я вас дуже прошу.
Is very clear. The images are on our TV screens, on our mobile phones every day. The images of buildings being bombed, of families having to flee, of the horrors that are being provoked by this war. The purpose of this conversation is to try and move beyond and dare to be prophetic and to talk about possible ways out and beyond. And that's why we've chosen the word solutions. Of course, there are military solutions. Are there legal solutions, Svetlana? And this is where I'd like to come back to you.
So speaking about legal solution, what do we have right now? Under international law, the act committed by Russia state is an act of aggression, which has no legal justification, and which was against UN Charter and against fundamental principle of international law and fundamental human rights. There are currently three main ways under international law to have Russia Federation as a state and its leaders to have them liable. And first way is the first way is the following. Ukraine already started proceeding before the International Court of Justice in The Hague, and Ukraine under Genocide Convention. And this case will be unique, and I'm sure that future generations of lawyers will pay a lot of attention to this case. Why? Ukraine was accused by Russia. So Russia claims that Ukraine committed genocide. And the key argument of Ukraine in this case is misuse of concept of genocide by Russian Federation. And Russia Federation tried to use this false claim as a justification for military operation on the territory of independent state. Therefore, Ukraine sued Russia Federation in International Court of Justice in order to prove that no genocide was happening and therefore no excuse for act of aggression. The second way, it's a European Court of Human Rights, and right now Russia was suspended from its right of representation in the Committee of Ministers and in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, but Russia still is a member of Council of Europe, So Russia is obliged to obey and its obligation under European Convention on Human Rights. So a few days ago, European Court of Human Rights ordered so-called interim measures of protection in case lodged by Ukraine against Russia. Under these measures, Russia is obliged to stop all acts of violence. But as we know, Russia is famous of ignoring decision and judgment of European Court of Human Rights. And the third way, legal way, which is available for Ukraine, this is ICC, International Criminal Court. And 39 states have already referred to the International Criminal Court, also in The Hague. And as a result, ICC prosecutor has now opened an investigation into current events in Ukraine. I have to mention that ICC has power to investigate any act of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity committed on the territory of Ukraine.
Thank you, Svetlana. That was a wonderful synthesis of the legal approach. But as you yourself said, there is a history and a tendency to simply flout whatever regulations or laws there may be. You also mentioned earlier the request that President Zelensky has also made frequently for a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Let me jump back to Volodymyr again. In terms of military solutions to the problem, what is your perspective? Are we looking at a long, drawn-out war? Are we looking at Russia in Afghanistan again?
Well, that's a very good question, and let me just kind of quickly share my personal experience and personal experience of time we are kind of living here, and this is not only mine. My colleagues and friends, they also share the same experience with me as well. Well, I mean, the feeling is that at least half a year has passed. I mean, it's just 1 week. It's just 1 week behind. It's the 9th day eventually of the war. But somehow psychologically and spiritually, there is feeling that this is at least half a year time that we are living, that we have lived through, and we are kind of living by hours. So I mean, no one here is making plans. I mean, the horizon, the planning horizon is very limited, is very short, and the situation is changing so rapidly that you're almost immersed in this now full of difficulties, challenges, unexpected events and situations that you have to go through. It's also probably, I mean, you experience that time in a way that you have to make so many unplanned and unexpected decisions at any given moment of your time because of the very kind of unexpected situation that we all realize to be now, which is war. I never myself was ever kind of thinking or planning or expecting myself to do this kind of briefing on the war in Ukraine, in my own country. So this is way beyond any imagination which was going on in my head. So it's kind of difficult to see and difficult to understand how things will go on. But I think that spirituality, I mean, from the viewpoint of kind of from the spiritual viewpoint, it's a very spiritually rich time that we are going through. In spite of all devastation, in spite of all problems that we are having and destruction that's going on spiritual, this is a very deep time. I think you could have sensed that from the video that you've shown us. People are making very, very serious decisions and commitments, and it's nothing like a thought experiment or something like that you're just playing with yourself, thinking what I would do in this situation, that situation. There is a situation already, and you have to make that decision. What would you do and how you act? And I think that I'm very kind of proud of the people here in Ukraine, because they certainly there's no panic in the country. so many of people decided to defend this country. We were able to have 100,000 volunteers who joined the army or the territorial defense forces in just a few days, and there were kind of huge lines of those young people, and not only young people who were kind of willing to drop themselves and get enrolled into the army. There's a great morale, I think, in the air, and Ukrainians are kind of defending the country in a very brave way. And I must say that there's kind of the general kind of understanding that Putin was hoping to invade the country and finish this kind of business operation, as he would call it, in probably 48 hours. It's also interesting that that there are very many imprisoned soldiers who are special police forces, so to speak, which is kind of unusual to have special police forces on the battlefield. And I think the case was that the hope was that the Russian tanks would simply parade through the country, and probably Ukrainians would just kind of throw flowers at them, and then the police forces would kind of follow and just clean up and kind of install a new government, etc., etc. That was the plan, but nothing like that happened, and that kind of makes me think, and this is why the whole world, I think, is supporting the country. Military-wise, we are doing very good. Military-wise, I think we are doing very good. My understanding is that Russia has brought in that country already something like 95% of all the forces they were kind of they have accumulated on the Ukrainian border, and they doesn't seem to have any more kind of immediate resources. I mean, Russian army is huge, obviously, but that operation in a way may be kind of exhausting itself to some extent. So it's difficult to say. Ukraine is certainly willing to resist, and we will resist. I think that people more and more are kind of hoping that the victory will be. I mean, it's like the percentage of the Ukrainians who are believing that Ukraine will be victorious in this country is about 82, and it's kind of higher than used to be just about a few days ago. So there is general atmosphere that we can defend this country, and the Russia should be stopped. And what in fact will happen? Well, I think it's kind of difficult to predict, but Ukraine is willing to resist. It is resisting very powerfully, I think.
Situation is changing so rapidly, but you mentioned earlier how proud you are of your fellow Ukrainians, and I think I speak for many of my colleagues certainly here, how much of an inspiration you are to us. I'd like to show another brief testimony of what is happening on the ground, and a concrete sign of the solidarity that is being expressed. This brief video was also produced by your Ukrainian Catholic University.
Наразі в нас основний акцент в тому, щоб організувати внутрішню роботу волонтерської організації ВУКу. Ми хочемо спочатку залучити всіх студентів, які тут проживають, тому що є дуже багато людей і всі мега сильно налаштовані допомагати, тільки треба скоординувати правильно ці всі бажання і зусилля людей. Є багато ботів зараз російських, які розповсюджують фейкову інформацію, і з цим треба боротися. Наразі, як наші студенти з цим борються, це вони просто сидять, відловлюють новинні ресурси і ведуть комунікаційну стратегію проти тої інформації, яку, в принципі, розповсюджують неправдиво. В ідеалі було б добре мати такі точки, куди конкретно адресу ти позавозиш, конкретно що.
the media, the role of social media. And here I'll turn to our two young journalists, Ostap and Christina, to hear your comments of this. I read a story just today of Ukrainian citizens, their houses bombed, their schools bombed, living in underground, and calling family members in Moscow, and their family members refusing to believe them, saying that this is impossible. Russia would never do this. Russia does not bomb civilians. Russia is there to free you, to save you, not to hurt you. Ostap, you are right there. You work with media, social media, traditional media. Talk to me about the role and the influence and how this could be a game changer and how the role of media might be something of a solution to this war.
Right, Sean. So like I will speak about my own experience. So I'm active both on Facebook and Twitter. And before the war, the new war, let's say the renewed war of Russia against Ukraine, my Twitter, I was tweeting mostly in Ukrainian for Ukrainian audience. Now I realize that it is important also to let the Western audience or people in the West know what is happening in Ukraine. I switched to English, and I see tremendous attention or tremendous this desire to know what is happening in Ukraine from Americans, from the British people, from people all across Europe, and not only and in Asia and Africa as well. Speaking about the Russian population, the Russian people, it's the story that you mentioned. I have the real story that I know. So like I have a friend. She is Russian. She's married to the Ukrainian guy. They live in Slavutich, which is close to Chernihiv, and so she lives there. She's from St. Petersburg herself, and she called her mom, and of course her family is very supportive and know all what is happening. But then her mother, she spoke to their neighbors, and she told them like, listen, my daughter, my own child, now is in a bomb shelter because of the Russian bombs. And the neighbors responded that you're lying, nothing is happening there. And she was like, listen, my own child right now is in a bomb shelter. How can't you believe me? I'm telling you. And she was like, she's lying to you. There's like, the Russians are not bombing the military. They're not bombing civilians. They're only after military targets or military bases. And I really hope that the social media, maybe Twitter, Facebook, will, I would like to say, open eyes for some people in Russia. I honestly don't know whether it is going to happen, but what I do know that it is important also like to shed the light and like to let them know. And because there are a lot of mothers in Russia whose sons are in the war, and I guess those mothers care about their sons and about their well-being. Or maybe some people in Russia, they care about the situation. I don't know whether they do or not, but it is important to both tell them and hear in the United States what is happening in Ukraine, and telling what's the situation on the ground, explaining the things. Well, I said that like the support is very high, unlike like never before. But before it all started, we saw some people questioning the things, like whether Ukraine is an aggressor, whether Ukraine violated Minsk agreements, whether Ukraine did something bad here. And it was important also to explain to people in the West, like A, B, C, this is what happens. Ukraine is not an aggressor. The Russians, they're amassing the troops, and this is like, that's what is happening right now on the ground. And that's what we have been trying to do. And I know that a lot of my fellow journalists in Ukraine who are in Kiev now, or who moved to the western parts of the country, or who were forced to leave the country and move to Poland or other countries in Europe, they're trying to post or tweet or just take videos in English also to show what is happening to the world, because it is very important. As you know, like I love this line when you open the Washington Post, you always see it like on the top, democracy dies in darkness. And when there's darkness, um, there is, I mean, we need to fight that and let the world know what is happening there.
In fact, the testimonies that I showed you from the Ukrainian Catholic University came to me via my social media accounts. Christina, as a young journalist now living outside of the country, and any advice for young people who may be watching us and listening to us right now, using social media, using the tools and the platforms that we have, what can we do? How can we contribute to a solution?
Yes, thank you for questions. I agree with Ostap. The social media is very, very cool way to know truths. Also, in Ukrainska Pravda, we have English version. We started this in the first day of war because we know that people abroad want to know true about situation in Ukraine, and that's why all Ukrainian channels and official channels of our government give the information in English and give information and videos to abroad. And I also advise to write a message from accounts from friends to you live in Ukraine and get information from them. Nobody tells us true as personally. Yeah, if you call your friends and ask them how are you there, and this is the most powerful choice for this situation, I think.
Just a reminder to anyone who has joined this conversation right now, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being with us. And do remember that we're here for you. The purpose of this conversation is to try to bring light, to bring understanding, to give context and comprehension to what is happening right now. So please send us your questions. I can read them. I can read them right here. I have one, and it's a very practical question. It's to you, Volodymyr, because you are there. You said you're on campus at the Ukrainian Catholic University right now. And the question is a very practical one. Simply, are lessons taking place? Are classes open? Have you had to suspend classes at the university?
No, we are not having classes in the kind of regular sense, but we also haven't announced a break or we haven't kind of suspended the classes. In the sense that we decided, well, I mean, let's have a kind of a workshop. Let's just do things, and which would be helping us to bring our victory. And so the students have emerged with all sorts of different initiatives, and many of them are in the field of humanitarian support, for example, something which we just saw here. Some of them are working in the media sphere, like our School of Journalism and Communication. So the students have fully immersed themselves in generating, producing certain content, in disseminating that content, which is a very, very critical task to do. So eventually, the message was, well, let's have like semester or whatever we'll see of kind of practice and doing certain practical things, something that they were kind of training themselves for and we were training themselves for. So let's kind of try and see how we can do that. And Svetlana, for example, with the students of law school, they are kind of very heavily immersed in collecting some materials or providing legal help for Ukrainians and for foreigners who happen to be in this kind of circumstances. So that's the general spirit and modality. We are also having kind of conversations and meetings with the students and taking advantage of Zoom, for example, so that we know who is where and who's working on what. So there's, I mean, that kind of personal connection and being in touch is really very, very critical and very, very important. So for us, just to see ourselves as a community with a good spirit, doing important work, helping other people, and helping other people to help our army, as a matter of fact. That's something that we are concentrating upon. And we are having already a series of classes or conversations, say a couple of classes per day where everyone is invited. So there is some kind of combination of academic reflection, limited though, plus a lot of kind of practical stuff on campus, which we do with the students here. So that's our kind of present situation regarding the classes. And who knows what will be in a week from now. So as I mentioned, we live day by day. And we just decided this evening that the next week will be in the same format. And what's going to be a week after that, that will remains to see.
Can I jump back to you quickly and ask you just very simply, do you think the world has, and in many cases still is, underestimating Vladimir Putin?
That's the question
you would like to answer.
Maybe I can just briefly say that. Well, definitely, I think the world underestimated Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian people, because what we saw before, I mean, U.S. intelligence, they estimated that Kiev or Ukraine will fall in 72 hours. Now we see it's like more than a week, right? And the cities are still standing. And we see that the Pentagon is giving daily briefings of what's the situation on the ground. And their assessment is that the Russian forces are slowing down on the ground and they cannot reach their desired progress, right? That's why they started shelling the cities with artillery, with air forces. And I think that's the part why the world is so amazed and impressed with the Ukrainian resistance and resilience that they probably have underestimated. Maybe they saw Afghanistan, that Kabul was taken without any resistance, basically, and probably they thought that would be the case in Ukraine, that the Ukrainian people would not resist. And Putin, I guess, himself also underestimated Ukrainians. So I think the question is here that how we fight and how the Ukrainian people showed their resistance and their strength in this war.
Stop. Svetlana, you can hear me, right? Yes? Good. I have another question for you then. Earlier on, you mentioned as a possible solution, you spoke specifically about imposing a no-fly zone over Ukraine. We know that President Zelensky has asked for the same thing, and several people are calling for it. But you also know that the President of the United States has ruled it out because in order to enforce a no-fly zone, NATO and the United States would have to engage with Russian forces in the air, and there is the fear of an even greater escalation of the conflict if that should happen. What is your opinion on that?
Again, as a lawyer, under UN Charter, each UN member state is obliged to do something when gross violation of human rights take place. And there are some procedures, so you can't help your neighbor if your neighbor does not ask for help. But Ukraine, as a member of global community, as a state who was among the founder of UN, ask for help, and not ask for help just in case, but ask for help because as of yesterday, 21 kids were killed by Russian soldiers, 55 were injured, and more than 2,000 civilians were killed by Russian bombs and missiles. Therefore, Ukraine asked for help and asked for help to protect basic human rights, like right to life of ordinary people. And yeah, there is, and I think that other UN members are obliged to help Ukraine in this situation. And so the tactic just not to react to the Russia's aggression does not work. We had a chance to see this after Crimea. So there was let me put this. The world was afraid to provoke Russia for more aggression after Russia occupied Crimea. So in many sense, global community stayed silent, and this encouraged Russia to go further. So now afterwards there was Donbass, and now we have full-scale aggression against Ukraine. So just keeping silent and in order to not to provoke Russia, this tactic does not work. Therefore, our president asked for no-fly zone, and each Ukrainian citizen nowadays asks for no-fly zone. Otherwise, there will be much more victims amongst Ukrainian population. Kids, women, elderly people, etc. They are the most vulnerable categories. And you can do nothing against military aircraft, against bomb. The only effective means right now is a no-fly zone, and the no-fly zone for Ukraine.
We close just in a few minutes. I wanted to go around the room very quickly. There are people watching us, there are people listening to us. We are not politicians, we are not economists, we are not world leaders, but we want to do something. So many people I've spoken to feel that they want to do something and they don't know what to do. Very, very quickly, start with you, Christina. What can someone who is watching you, listening to you now, what do you suggest that they do right now?
So you can share information about situation in Ukraine and also help us army and money. You can go to participate and tell true about situation in Ukraine, I think.
Vladimir, would you give us your suggestions, please?
Yes, I would very much agree with Christina, and I would say that that information sharing and is really very, very critical. I may also ask you, please, do not call that situation a conflict, as we're kind of hearing from many people. There is also a very important thing that the structures, if I may put it, of the kind of Russian world or Russian myth, in which Russia was investing billions and billions of dollars to build that kind of Russian myth, and under cover of that Russian myth to kind of promote its very aggressive acts. This is something which has to be, I mean, people have to be kind of disenchanted with this, and this is where kind of personal being in touch, being in contact, I think is very, very critical. And it's important to understand, I think my vision of the situation is that we are in a kind of pilgrimage to freedom. That's what's actually going on in this country. And you all, I mean, the Europeans, you all are invited to join that pilgrimage to freedom. So this is an invitation, and solidarity is very, very important, very, very critical. So please do stay with us. And it will take years and years to rebuild, to restore. So that's a long trip, a long journey ahead of us. And please be with us. Stay with us.
We are, Volodymyr. It's a promise. Svetlana, you have already made some proposals, again, just very briefly, for someone who is not an expert in international law, who's someone simply seeing what we're seeing on our screens. What can we do?
The key statement is that everyone is responsible for everyone is responsible for respect for human rights, but in a different person in a different way are responsible. So layperson can raise awareness of their family, of their communities, especially I'm referring to lawyers, about what is going on in Ukraine. And here I agree with Volodymyr that it is very important to give a proper names, not Ukrainian crisis, not Ukrainian conflict, not Ukrainian special operation. This is full act of aggression against Ukraine, and it will help. It will help to get a proper response from national government and from international community.
Last word is with you. You did mention earlier some very concrete efforts on the part of the United States and Americans, but you personally, your advice to us, what can we do?
Correct. So the Ukrainian American community, at least they said there are 3 steps that everyone here in the United States can take, and I think that could apply to any country in the world. So first, they say people can go and protest to show the governments of their country that not only Ukrainians, but their constituents, their citizens, they care about the situation and they are interested in resolving this. Second thing, here people in America, they say that you can call your representatives in Congress or in Parliament, right? To say that please do something to support Ukraine, do more to help the Ukrainian people. Third, they said that everyone can donate either to Ukrainian military, or if you don't want to give you money to military, you can donate to humanitarian assistance or other things. Also, I would add that, like on my side, that it is very important to keep in mind that there's a huge wave of Russian disinformation, and we've seen this in the United States and in Europe. And I know that we have the evidence that in Italy there are also efforts to spread the Russian disinformation, and it's important to choose carefully what you read, to double check, and at least to check the Ukrainian sources. There are plenty of Ukrainian sources in English. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that, as Martin Luther King said, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So if you want to help Ukraine, just keep this thing in mind as well.
Reminding us, Ostap, just to close, I have a comment here. Your phrase, Volodymyr, pilgrimage to freedom. It truly is a beautiful expression and one that I'll remember. And so before we do close, I would like to leave the very, very last word to Pope Francis. And this is what he said at his Wednesday general audience.
Avete sostenuto l'Ucraina aprendo i vostri confini, i vostri cuori e le porte delle vostre casse agli ucraini che scappano dalla guerra. State offrendo generosamente a loro tutto il necessario perché possano vivere dignitosamente nonostante la drammaticità del momento.
To the Polish pilgrims present, but they're words that are addressed to all of us, to keep those doors open, to keep that pilgrimage of freedom moving. I thank my guests here on this webinar for this afternoon, Professor Volodymyr Turchanovsky, Professor Svetlana Keluk, Ostap Yarish, and Christina Golovko. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your insights and your sensitivities. You are with us, you're in our minds, in our hearts, and in our prayers. We will not leave you. God bless you and thank you, and God bless Ukraine. Here from Rome Reports, I'm Sean Patrick Lovett.
Thank you, Sean. God bless.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.